Okay, we're moving on here. We're in, well, actually, we're still in week 3, but we're going to talk about civil liberties, okay? Civil liberties. So hopefully you got your PowerPoint for that. But if you go to slide number 2, there's a court case called United States versus Jones. And it's an interesting case because it was an instance where the police put our surveillance device, basically a tracking device, on the bumper of a suspect's car that was engaged in illegal activity. And they basically followed that car to where the illegal activity was occurring, and they busted the guy, okay? So the issue at hand before the Supreme Court, not his guilt, because he was guilty, but can the police put a surveillance device, a tracking device on your vehicle without a warrant, okay? And the court decided that the 14th Amendment's, or the 4th Amendment's rather, protection against illegal searches and seizures of persons, houses, papers, and effects reasonably extends to private property such as an automobile. Hence, the placement of a GPS tracking device on an automobile without a warrant is prohibited. Okay, so this is this idea of civil liberties, liberties for our person. Okay, which is distinguished from civil rights, which are group rights. Okay, so we're talking in this chapter, in this segment here, about civil liberties, which are individual rights. Okay, so if you go to slide number 3, you'll see the distinction there. Civil liberties are specific individual rights, such as freedom of speech, protection from self-incrimination, protection from illegal searches and seizures. Okay. Civil rights are group rights, okay, dealing with, racial issues, sexual discrimination, religious discrimination, okay? In other words, how groups are treated differently by the government, okay? And so we're going to talk, again, in particular about civil liberties in this chapter. So some of the key points of discussion in this chapter, if you go to slide number 4, is the idea of freedom of conscience we're going to talk about is the most basic of democratic rights, but it is not unlimited. Due process of law refers to legal protections or procedural safeguards designed to ensure that an individual's rights are respected by the government as the government perhaps takes your life, liberty, or property. Okay? Government can take your life, liberty, and property if it follows due process. Okay? Jury trial, Miranda rights, okay, things like that. And over the course of our history, American civil liberties have been broadened in law and more fully protected by the courts. And, the challenge you deal with when you're dealing with civil liberties is, my individual rights. I've got a right to do whatever I want. I've got a right to say whatever I want. I got a right to whatever, okay? But the problem is, if your right to do whatever you want bumps up against the needs of society, who has the right of way? Okay, these are some of the issues we're going to be talking about in this section here. Okay, so if you go to slide number 5, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the 14th Amendment. Okay, the Bill of Rights was created in 1791 in response to the Anti-Federalist request for a Bill of Rights. Okay, and their motivation was they feared an overarching national government. There's got to be a buffer. Okay, individuals are here. There's got to be a buffer between the federal government and the individual, okay? That's what they were trying to establish there, okay? So one of the cases that deal with this, or at least give us some of the first hints and glimpses of where the court would start going as it pertains to some of these liberties, is a case called United States versus Caroline Products, okay? And again, this in particular applies to civil rights, but again, you need to understand this. So it was a particular court case, and again, I'm not going to get into all details, but there was a footnote in the case, okay, in footnote 4. It's called the most famous footnote in legal history, okay? And it was a case where the federal government, again, this was during FDR's presidency, was expanding the general welfare clause, okay? Government was getting bigger, and government was getting bigger. And so what the court said in this footnote was this, is if the government expands the general welfare clause, okay, for the good of the nation, the court is in turn going to expand, if you will, the rights of discrete minorities, because the concern they were having was almost an echo of what the anti-federalists had and why they asked for a Bill of Rights, is this idea that, you know, if the government's going to get really, really big in this Constitution, you better give us a Bill of Rights to provide a buffer. And that's exactly what the court said, okay? This is what the court said in this particular case, okay, in footnote number 4. There may be a narrower scope for the operation of the presumption of constitutionality when the legislation appears on its face to be within a specific prohibition of the Constitution, such as those of the first 10 amendments, which are deemed equally specific when held to be embraced within the 14th, okay? So again, it's the court is indicating that it's going to start really looking at these first 10 amendments through the 14th Amendment, okay, in court cases. But here's the punchline, okay? If you go to slide number 7. It is to be subjected to a more exacting judicial scrutiny under the general prohibitions of the 14th Amendment than are most other types of legislation. Whether prejudice against discrete and insular minorities may be a special condition which tends seriously to curtail the operation of those political processes ordinarily to be relied upon to protect minorities, which may call for a correspondingly more searching judicial inquiry. Okay, so what does all this mean? Okay, I don't want to get you, don't want to keep you in deep weeds here. What the court was saying in footnote 4 of Caroline Products is if you expand the size and scope of the federal government, then the court is going to basically start protecting the rights of minorities more and is going to start basically looking at the first 10 amendments to make sure they're not violated in the process, okay? So they're going to start expanding the rights of minorities, okay? This is dealing specifically with civil rights, but you just kind of need to understand this is where, and this is what caused the court to go in the direction it went later on in the 50s and 60s. Okay, so I'm going to end right there.